3, 4.
Good morning. Good morning. Hi, everyone. This is Jewish Talk coming to you live from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC. Also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes apps. We can be seen in the studios on my Facebook Live page and the WHPC Facebook. So, as we say each week, we are double-faced on 2 Facebook pages. And this program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So, hi there. My name is Rabbi Pearl. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This all depends on where you are listening or watching. And don't be afraid to post your name or your comments on our Facebook page or any page, and we'll be happy to respond and to recognize. So let's say hello to Dr. Kilshevsky, who's somehow boating on the ocean somewhere, and to Jean. Good morning to you, and to everybody joining us, of course, Harvey as well. Well, today I'm going to dedicate our program to my Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose 25th anniversary of passing was recognized yesterday on Shabbos Gimel Tammuz. One of the greatest contributions of the Chabad Rebbe to our lives today is the need to be a rebel, a non-conformist, and to challenge the status quo. Today, allow me to examine the contribution of the Rebbe as a true leader, and we will go on to propose what each of us can and must do when enlightened leadership is lacking in the world. See, the Rebbe teaches us how every person, even ones with insubordinate and seemingly negative traits, can make a difference. Sometimes, especially in unusual times, it takes unusual people to get the job done. People who don't walk the straight and narrow. People who are thieves or rebels or nonconformists. So let me share with you a story. A young widow once came crying to the Baal Shem Tov, who was the 18th century founder of the Hasidic movement, and she said that her only child was gravely ill. The doctors had given up hope, and she was crying, please do something to save my child. The Baal Shem Tov, whose heart was always open to those in need, and especially to widows and orphans, reassured her and sent her home, promising to do everything in his power. He then proceeded to gather together a minyan, a quorum of 10 holy tzaddikim, to pray for the child's immediate healing, but to no avail. As much as she tried opening the gates of heaven, they sadly were unsuccessful. The Baal Shem Tov sensed that the decree was sealed and could not be reversed by their prayers. The Baal Shem Tov, however, was not one to give up. He fell upon an idea. He asked his driver to repair his horse-driven wagon, and they took off for the forest. There, he directed the driver to a particular spot, a dangerous area where thieves lurked. When they arrived, the Baal Shem Tov climbed off the wagon. Within a few moments, he was surrounded by a band of thieves. But when their leader recognized the Baal Shem Tov, he put down his weapons and he said with astonishment, "What are you doing here in the wild, in the forest?" And the Baal Shem Tov, he said, "I'm here because I need your help. I need 10 thieves to pray for a sick child." The thieves didn't understand, but out of respect for the Baal Shem Tov, they complied. And so this minyan, this quorum of thieves, was assembled, and they prayed with the Baal Shem Tov. Guess what, dear friends? The child miraculously recovered. Later, when the Baal Shem Tov was asked by his surprised students, how were you able to accomplish with 10 thieves what you could not accomplish with 10 holy men? And the Baal Shem Tov famously replied, I saw that all the gates in heaven were locked, and I need someone to break in. The story teaches us a vital lesson. Sometimes it takes unusual people to get the job done. People who don't walk the straight and narrow. People who are thieves or rebels or conformists or nonconformists. You see, in unusual times, often the best solution to problems are unusual people and unusual methods. And that thought brings us to this week's Torah portion, the Torah reading, which is devoted to a rebel. A rebel, yes, Korach, first cousin to Moses. And a curious thing is that he gathered and incited a group of mutineers to challenge Moses. And of course, their rebellion ended in tragedy. And the question is, why is it important for the Torah to tell us this story? What can we take away from it today? The Torah is generally extremely careful not to speak in a negative term, even about an impure animal. So why are we being told about the disgrace of Korach and his men? Why the need to remember the entire uprising and in such detail? One of the most powerful analyses of this episode was given by the Rebbe, who, as I said, whose 25th yahrzeit we honored this Shabbos, Gimel Tammuz. And back in 1990, the Rebbe connected the story of Korach, this uprising of Korach, with a fascinating statement by the Rambam, Maimonides. Maimonides says that not only the tribe of Levi, but anyone whose spirit feels generously and motivated for leadership can aspire to be on the spiritual level of a high priest. Anyone. What does it mean? You see, thinking of Korach, his desire was to be a high priest. He wanted to say, why was Aaron the high priest? He should be the high priest. So the actual desire to want to be a high priest has its own positive side. It's a positive thing. Where would we get such a feeling? Well, at Mount Sinai, we were called Mamleches Kohanim. We were considered a kingdom of priests. And the Baal HaTurim explains it means a high priest. So in a certain sense, every one of us carries that DNA of a high priest. Every one of us can aspire to reach such a level. Korach's mistake was his additional desire to actually physically serve as a high priest. That was his mistake. His error was in the way he pursued this priesthood. You see, the way to achieve this inner desire is through bittul, which means suspending and subjugating oneself to Hashem and Hashem's will of who is to be the chosen leader. So he really erred. His mistake was in understanding the nature of a true leader. In his mind, a leader meant a powerful person who serves as a human intermediary between God and his people, between the Torah's truth and his students. He thought that a leader is defined by his strengths, his wisdom, his charisma, his wealth, all the qualities necessary to lead a large group of individuals. But my dear friends, that is not what a true leader is all about. A true leader is precisely the opposite. He is defined not by what he is, but by what he is not. The single most important quality of a true leader is humility. As the Torah states about Moses, that Moses was the most humblest man, humble among all the people of the earth. You see, the leader is a transparent channel, and therefore he becomes a vehicle for godliness. He is a living example and the epitome of how God wants a person to be. Deifying individuals, my friends, is anathema to Judaism. To deify a person is simply idolatry, pure and simple. We only worship God and God alone. The greatness of a tzaddik, of a righteous individual, a Rebbe, a great leader like Moses, lies not in the power of the individual, but in the power of God that is working through that person. Indeed, there cannot be even the slightest tinge of individual ego or personality that gets in the way and that does not allow the inherent godliness to shine through. And that is why, this explains why we need a Moses figure in every generation, because we as individuals are consumed and overwhelmed by material life. Our egos, our personalities get in the way of accessing God and His truth. So we need a selfless leader, a humble teacher to guide us, to show us the way to access our souls and God. Let me pause for a moment to say hello to all those tuning in, all those listening. We appreciate you taking time out every Sunday to join us. And to all those on Facebook, hello to Harold Kornfeld, good morning from Florida. To Jean Marie, to Joel Harris, good morning, Joel. How you doing, Joel? and to Louis Pushkin, and to Melissa Renee. Wow, fantastic. And everybody, thank you so much. So, back to our definition of a true leader. In other words, is not an intermediary that stands in the way between us and God. A true leader is an invisible aid in helping us to connect to God in our own unique way. The true teacher does not teach his own truth. He teaches us a higher truth, and he makes it clear that it belongs to his students as much as it belongs to him. The true teacher has no ego. He recognizes that at all times that he is merely a messenger passing on a truth from a greater place. Korach's mistake was not in his desire to attain the state of a high priest. That is a healthy and necessary aspiration. We all have that leadership qualities. His mistake was doing so for his self-fulfillment. Too much focus on self, which of course is a form of arrogance. To attain the state of high priest, one needs humility, to subjugate oneself to divine will and to the will of the humble leaders that God chooses. Korach did not understand this fact, that true leadership is not about power and ambition. It's about humility and selflessness. So when God chose Moses to be the leader of the Jewish people, I'm sure you all remember, Moses strongly resisted. I'm a man of no words. Right? One of the arguments, he said, I can't speak. God said to him, what are you talking about? Who gives man the mouth to speak if not I? So God chose Moses precisely because he did not want the job. And because he would not speak his own words, only the words of God. And I remember reflecting on the Rebbe, after his father-in-law passed away, it took a year of cajoling, literally, by the Hasidim, by his followers around the world, to encourage him. He did not want to be the leader. He reluctantly accepted the position. And so, in a sense, we owe Korach, the rebel, a great debt for serving as a vehicle for this Torah lesson. Firstly, the need to aspire. We all have within us to aspire to a spiritual state of priesthood. And secondly, it teaches us how and how not to reach this state by clarifying the meaning of a false versus true leadership. And that is why the Torah portion yesterday is all about recognizing that and determining who is the real leader and who is the false one. The lesson to each of us is profound and far-reaching. We can reach the highest levels. Nothing is impossible. But to do that, we need to suspend our own egos and self-interest and dedicate ourselves to a higher calling. So I would put the formula goes like this. When you are dedicated to your own self and your own needs, you may reach great heights, but only as far as you, a mortal, can reach. When you dedicate your life to an eternal cause greater than yourself, then you become an extension of that eternity. It's very simple. If you dedicate yourself to something mortal and finite, guess what? Then you become mortal and finite. If you dedicate yourself to the immortal, then you become immortal. I'd like to say good morning to Harry Oates, to Yosef Vinitsky, to Lynn Payton. Wow. Harry Oates, how you doing, Harry? Hope everything is going well for everybody and enjoying this long weekend. So, in 1990, when the Rebbe addressed this issue, it actually offers a very relevant message for today. How we relate to our youth, and how we relate in general to anomalies, which today has become quite regular. Each of us has, as we all know in our hearts, we have our own unique and often bizarre life circumstances. We may even want to forget and bury some of the insubordinate natures and experiences. So how should we react to the irregular, the rebel within us? You see, the Rebbe took this approach to a new level, making it a cornerstone in addressing the rebellious energies in all of us, even the seemingly non-traditional ones. The Rebbe taught us that we do not need to suppress or hide even those insubordinate voices and experiences that may make us feel embarrassed. On the contrary, harness and channel them to shatter resistance. Use them to propel oneself to unprecedented places. I want to tell you a story. A very bright young man was constantly falling behind in school, and nobody understood why. Finally, his parents took him to see the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to him, "I hear you are very gifted at science. So tell me, what is the difference between a very bright electric light and a laser beam?" And the teenager answered, "That's simple. The laser amplifies and focuses light rays to make the beam more intense. The other light just disperses its rays every which way. But doesn't it take more energy to produce the laser beam?" The teenager, smiling because he realized what the Rebbe was leading to, "Not really," he said. "It's just a matter of concentration and focus." You see, this, my friends, captures one of the greatest lessons to all of us of how to ignite the fires of revolution inside each and every one of us. As we grow into adults, we all know that our youthful enthusiasms and idealisms, that's the fires that burn within us so wildly as teenagers, usually wane and weaken. Right? Some attribute this to our so-called maturity and seasoning, but is that true? Do we not simply abandon the ideal of changing the world and fighting the status quo? And we kind of hide behind this idea, well, we're more mature, we're more seasoned. You know, I shared with our family throughout this Shabbos, throughout this last few days, we've had marathons of Farbrengens and learning and discussing the Rebbe and hearing stories that inspired us. And one of the stories is that Rebbe, as you may know, would always distribute cake at certain times of the year, honey cake, with a blessing to have a sweet year. One particular year, a young lady, I mean, in maybe 8-9 years old, was in the line and received a piece of cake, and she looked at it and looked up at the Rebbe and said, "Rebbe, where's the icing? Where's the icing on the cake?" And the Rebbe smiled in a very fatherly, nice, gentle voice, said, "In Chabad, in Lubavitch, there's no icing." And I shared with our grandchildren who were visiting here in our community, what does this mean? On the simplest level, right? You know, the cake is the cake, standalone, has no icing. It could mean the idea icing is like an extra, you know, one should stick to the basics and not look for the icing or the extra pleasures, like, so to speak. But on a deeper level, to me, I thought, when the Rebbe said there's no icing, in Lubavitch there's no icing from the word coldness. If a person, you know, lives a life of status quo, basically he's iced over. You know, that's it, you know, finished. You go into hibernation and fatik. The Rebbe says there's no icing in Lubavitch. There's always warmth, enthusiasm, hope, gratitude, no judgmentalism against anybody. The idea is we all have the ability to change the world. And if we have certain rebellious abilities, talents that you could say that are tumbling inside of us, use it, focus, laser beam it, but always fight the status quo. The Rebbe touched the very core of every soul that he came in contact with. When it came to young people, those yet unshaped and undamaged by the trials and tribulations of life, or as we would say in our lives, as we get older, we become fachadat. What was the Rebbe's message? Of hope, of uplifting. And his message struck a chord in the hearts of young people and stoked the fires in their bellies. Thousands of young people responded to his call to change the world for better. They rose to the occasion and mobilized themselves to become the Rebbe's emissaries in every part of the world, to illuminate their corner with light, with mitzvahs, with Torah mitzvahs, with virtue and with kindness. And therefore, dear friends, I'd like to share with you from my heart how I feel today. together with my dear wife, Bluma. I and my dear wife would not be here today. We would not have ever come to this wonderful community to speak to you, to be in this community, and met such wonderful, special people and building all together, were it not for the spiritual revolution that the Rebbe ignited within us. So why did we follow him with this total dedication? I submit, those who wonder about that have never met a true leader, of course. The so-called leaders around us, political, business, sports, entertainment, are essentially nothing more than good administrators or people driven by an aggressive ambition that led them to climb the leadership ladder. And I'm not even addressing, of course, the rampant corruption surrounding leaders. However, I and many others have had the distinct privilege and honor to meet a true leader, a godly man, a humble man, a man entirely dedicated to a higher cause. The Rebbe, all throughout his leadership, through the many years, the Rebbe did not take one single day of vacation. And when he traveled up to the Catskills to greet the young students at Camp Gan Yisrael, the Chabad camp, when it first opened up, and it took hours to get there, in those days before the 17 was opened up, etc. The Rebbe spoke about it. It would take him years to make up for the hours that he spent on that traveling. The Rebbe was so dedicated to the higher cause. And I want to tell you a story about the Rebbe as a child, which will give you an insight of what a leader is all about. This was a sweltering, stifling, unbearable, hot summer when the Rebbe was a child. He was about 5 years old. And he was walking the street of the Russian town where he was born. He was wearing a wool casquette, a woolen cap covering his head. And he's walking the street on this very hot day in Russia when he meets one of those non-religious Jewish intellectuals who populated Russia in those days. And he himself, this intellectual, was walking around with his head uncovered. So the scholar said to this 5-year-old, "Why don't you take the hat off, this thick hat, from your head in this heat?" So the 5-year-old, the Rebbe, who would become the Rebbe, replied, "Mitodach nicht. We are not allowed to go with an uncovered head." So the man cynically says, "Ich will das einisch nehmen auf sich," which means, says, "I'll take the punishment." So how would you respond to that? Well, let me tell you what the Rebbe, as a little child, replied. "Was ist der Unterschied, si du oder ich?" Which translates, what difference does it make whether you or I will be punished? You see, many of us are busy with taking care of ourselves. Often we can be perfectly fine if we can get away with something and someone else will carry out the burden. As Churchill said about appeasing tyrants, it's like feeding the crocodiles in the hope that you will be eaten the last. But the answer of a leader is, I am in the same boat with you. We're in this together. If something is wrong, something hurts you, it hurts me. If something is wrong, it's wrong for you and it's wrong for me, regardless who will be punished for it. So again, I, for one, learnt how to access my own soul from the Rebbe. I learnt how to access the Torah and the thousands of years of Jewish history and scholarship in order to understand the forces reshaping our geopolitical as well as our psycho-spiritual landscapes. I learned from the Rebbe how to love everyone unconditionally, even those I may not agree with all the time. I learned how to teach values without being judgmental or condescending. I learned to respect the true dignity of every soul on earth, because each one is absolutely necessary and indispensable in the scheme of things. I learned that we do not know, nor is it our role to define which soul is greater than the other. Were it not for the Rebbe, I would not be standing here today, nor would I know what even to say to you. And because of this, I want to honor this day, the Gimel Tammuz, in this special way. You see, today we are desperately in need of true leadership. And the Rebbe taught us all to become leaders in our own right. We all must become revolutionaries and visionaries. And I'm speaking to all of us, watching us listening to us. You see, each of us can aspire to reach a state or a level of priesthood, of holies of holies. And that comes through our dedication to the cause. We can really attain this level. We are all challenged today to rise up in a powerful spiritual revolution, fully armed with the strength, the blessings, the teachings, and the guidance of the Rebbe and the Torah. His legacy empowers us to forge ahead and actualize the unique potential each of us has in illuminating the sphere of influence around us. With the Torah as our guide, we can give free rein to our revolutionary spirits. We can see through the haze and create the revolution so needed today. What kind of revolution am I talking about? A revolution not of rebellion, but a revolution of goodness and kindness that will ultimately sweep across the world and bathe this earth in the light of godliness and holiness. So allow me to conclude with a couple of stories that we shared over this weekend of the importance of appreciating that we should not allow our own our biases that we may have, or either by nature or nurture or a life's experience, but to think out of the box and to be able to look at things in a very positive and an uplifting way, and never to allow anything to bog us down in creating this idea that we cannot move forward. And there was a particular student who, 14-year-old girl, and she was way back, and a new Chabad school had opened up, and her father was insisting that she should go and leave the school where she was and go to this school, high school. And she said, I don't want to become a test case in this new school. I'm not going. She had this independent streak inside of her. So her father said, you know what, write to Rabbi Schneerson, write to the Rebbe. So she wrote to the Rebbe and said, you know what, I don't want to be a guinea pig in this new school. The Rebbe crossed out the word guinea pig, sent back the letter, and said the word guinea pig, you are a chalutza, you are a pioneer. The Rebbe showed her that she had the ability to be not a test case, but she had the ability to lead, to be the pioneer. And indeed, when she got that answer, she felt empowered that she could climb mountains and the valleys, etc., to be able to make things, to be able to accomplish her goal in life. My friends, think about these ideas. May Hashem bless us when we look forward to the world filled with goodness and kindness with the coming of Mashiach, when there will be no more dichotomies in life, and all of us will live a life filled with goodness, with complete synergized with holiness that we all seek, where there's no more dichotomies in life, but a world filled with goodness and holiness. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, everyone.